What is up, fellow geeks? Super Geek Girl here. Happy holidays to one and all. Tonight, this is the SGG holiday special. For a while now, I have been teasing that I would do some dramatic readings of some of the many books of Skyrim, and tonight is that night. So tonight is just going to be a chill night. We're just going to hang out in Proudspire Manor, and we're going to enjoy some fine literature. Also, just FYI, I am still getting over my unfortunate bout of bronchitis, so I may be coughing a little bit during the stream. Perfectly normal, I assure you. Maybe. We'll see. Alright, so for the past few weeks, I have been collecting books. Some of them have been special requests from you guys. Some are books that I enjoy, personally. I'm just going to go ahead and grab them here. Actually, let me put away the books that I have in my inventory right now so I don't get confused. You would think for how long I've had this planned in the books, I would be better prepared, but nope. Okay, well, I'll just note I can't, Hey, Stumpy, good to see ya! Welcome to the chat, sir. You're just in time. You can't hear me? Okay, hang on one second. Hey, Insane Nachos, welcome to the chat. One second, real quick. Alright, is that better? Can you guys hear me now? Was I just talking into the ether for the past, 7 minutes? I was just talking into the ether for the past 7 minutes. Great! Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, now that you guys can actually hear me, I'll just redo my intro real quick. Happy holidays. Tonight, as you guys may well be aware, we are going to take it easy. We're going to have a chill stream where I read some of your picks, for some of the best pieces of literature in Skyrim. I have spent a few weeks off camera, well, one, being ill, but two, collecting several books and stories. So we're gonna read through some of them. Tonight's just gonna be a real chill stream. Just a little holiday treat for y'all for being so awesome, and being so supportive of me as I start out on this, streaming journey of mine. This is for you guys. So, my way of saying thank you for sticking with me, through inconsistent scheduling and, me being horrible at these games, but y'all still tune in and watch anyway. It really does mean a lot to me, to have you guys here, so thank you so much, and, let's enjoy tonight. Tonight's gonna be a lot of fun. So, I'ma get in my cozy chair here. Here we go. Got my plate of sleep rolls. My goblet of Alto wine. or Nordmead, whatever my drink of choice is. Too bad there isn't a place where there's a nice fireplace background. I do have a fireplace. Let me see if I can get over there. It doesn't have any ambient noise, unfortunately, but it is a fireplace. Hey, Lightning SRP, welcome. You're just in time. We're about to get started. Yeah, here we go. Here's a fireplace. This is good enough. Or I could go to an inn. Hey, Moldy! Good to see you, man. Welcome to the chat. Alright, I'm gonna say, this is good enough. I could go to an inn, but I kind of just want to stay close to Proudspire Manor for tonight. No need to run around. So, let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, this is, you'll have to bear with me. I am still kind of recovering somewhat. From bronchitis, a lovely thing for a voice actress to have. But we are going to go ahead and start with a tale that I'm going to get to the lusty Argonian maid. Everybody just calm down. What would be the fun in doing that right off the bat, right? I'm going to make y'all wait. You're making me read it, and I'm going to make y'all wait. But first, we're going to start off with, one of my favorite stories. The tale of what happens when, alteration magic, doesn't exactly do what it says on the tin. This is, I love how there's multiple requests for it. Is chat a bunch of pervs? You know what? At this point, they may be. Who knows? Whatever. It's the internet. Everyone's a perv on the internet. We will get to Lusty Argonian Maid, I promise. For now, we're gonna start with breathing water. Also, if I cough during this, I apologize. Alright, here we go. Breathing Water by... Also, I'm probably gonna butcher these names, so I apologize in advance. By Haliel Mierm. He walked through the dry, crowded streets of Balfell, glad to be among so many strangers. In the wharves of Vivek, he had no such anonymity. They knew him to be a smuggler, but here, he could be anyone. A lower-class peddler, perhaps. A student, even. Some people even pushed against him as he walked past, as if to say, "We would not dream of being so rude as to acknowledge that you don't belong here." Serene Raelis was not in any of the taverns, but he knew she was somewhere. Perhaps behind a tenement window, or poking around in a dunghill for an exotic ingredient for some spell or another. He knew little of the ways of sorceresses, but that they always seemed to be doing something eccentric. Because of this prejudice, he nearly passed by the old Dunmer woman having a drink from a well. It was too prosaic, but he knew from the look of her that she was Serene Raelis, the great sorceress. "I have gold for you," he said to her back, "if you will teach me the secret of breathing water." She turned around. A wide, wet grin stretched across her weathered features. "I ain't breathing it, boy. I'm just having a drink." "Don't mock me," he said, stiffly. "Either you're Serene Raelis, and you will teach me the spell of breathing water, or you aren't. Those are the only possibilities." "If you're going to learn breathe water, you're going to have to learn there are more possibilities than that, boy. The School of Alteration is all about possibilities, changing patterns, making things be what they could be. Maybe I ain't Saren Rayless, but I can teach how to breathe water. She wiped her mouth dry. Or maybe I am Saren Rayless, and I won't. Or maybe even I can teach you to breathe water, but you can't learn. I'll learn, he said, simply. Why don't you just buy yourself a spell of water breathing or a potion over at the Mages Guild? She asked. That's how it's generally done. They're not powerful enough, he said. I need to be underwater for a long time. I'm willing to pay whatever you ask, but I don't want any questions. I was told you could teach me. What's your name, boy? That's a question, he replied. His name was Therian Winloth, but in Vivek, they called him the Toll Man. His job, such as it was collecting a percentage of the loot from the smugglers when they came into harbor to bring to his boss in Kimona Tong. Of the value of that percentage, he earned another percentage. In the end, it was very small indeed. He had scarcely any gold of his own, and what he had, he gave to Saren Rayless. The lessons began that very day. The sorceress brought her pupil, whom she simply called Boy, out to a low sandbank along the sea. I will teach you a powerful spell for breathing water, she said, but you must become a master of it. As with all spells and all skills, the more you practice, the better you get. Even that ain't enough. To achieve true mastery, you must understand what it is you're doing. It ain't simply enough to perform a perfect thrust of a blade. You must also know what you're doing and why. That's common sense, said Therian. Yes, it is, said Saren, closing her eyes. But the spells of alteration are all about uncommon sense. The infinite possibilities, breaking the sky, swallowing space, dancing with time, setting ice on fire, believing that the unreal may become real. You must learn the rules of the cosmos, and then break them. That sounds very difficult, replied Therian, trying to keep a straight face. Serene pointed to the small silver fish darting along the water's edge. They don't find it so. They breathe water just fine. But that's not magic. What I'm saying to you, boy, is that it is. For several weeks, Saren drilled her student, and the more he understood about what he was doing, and the more he practiced, the longer he could breathe underwater. When he found that he could cast a spell for as long as he needed, he thanked the sorceress and bade her farewell. There is one last lesson I have to teach you, she said. You must learn that desire is not enough. The world will end your spell no matter how good you are, and no matter how much you want it. That's a lesson I'm happy not to learn, he said, and left at once for the short journey back to Vivek. The wharves were much the same, with all the same smells, the same sounds, and the same characters. His boss had found a new toll man, he'd learned from his mates. They were still out looking for the smuggler's ship, Morodrang, but they had given up hope of ever seeing it. Therian knew they would not. He had seen it sink from the wharf a long time ago. On a moonless night, he cast his spell and dove into the thrashing purple waves. He kept his mind on the world of possibilities, that books could sing, that green was blue, that water was air, that every stroke and kick brought him closer to a sunken ship filled with treasure. He felt magicka surge all around him as he pushed his way down. Ahead, he saw a ghostly shadow of the Morodrang, its mast billowing in a wind of deep water currents. He also felt his spell beginning to fade. He could break reality long enough to breathe water all the way back up to the surface, but not enough to reach the ship. The next night he dove again, and this time the spell was stronger. He could see the vessel in detail, clouded over and dusted in sediment. the wound in its hull where it had struck the reef, a glint of gold beckoning from within. But still he felt reality closing in, and he had to surface. The third night, he made it into the steerage, past the bloated corpses of the sailors, nibbled and picked apart by fish, their glassy eyes bulging, their mouths stretched open. Had they only known the spell, he thought briefly, but his mind was more occupied by the gold scattered along the floor, the boxes that contained them shattered. He considered scooping as much as he could and carrying to his pockets. But a sturdy iron box seemed to bespeak more treasures. On the wall was a row of keys. He took each down and tried it on the locked box, but none opened it. One key, however, was missing. Tharian looked around the room. Where could it be? His eyes went to the corpse of one of the sailors, floating in a dance of death not far from the box, his hands tightly clutching something. It was a key. When the ship had begun to sink, this sailor had evidently gone for the iron box. Whatever was in it had to be very valuable. Tharian took the sailor's key and opened the box. It was filled with broken glass. He rummaged around until he felt something solid, and pulled out 2 flasks of some kind of wine. He smiled as he considered the foolishness of the poor alcoholic. This was what was important to the sailor, out of all the treasure in the Moildrung. Then, suddenly, Tharian Winlove felt reality. He had not been paying attention to the grim, tireless advance of the world on his spell. It was fading away, his ability to breathe water. There was no time to surface. There was no time to do anything. As he sucked in, his lungs filled with cold, briny water. A few days later, the smugglers working on the wharf came upon the drowned body of the former tollman. Finding a body in the water in Vivek was not in itself noteworthy, but the subject that they discussed, over many bottles of Flynn, was how did it happen that he drowned with 2 potions of water breathing in his hands? And that is the tale of breathing water. I won't lie, my jaw dropped the first time I read that. That's, really good one. Hey, Zelda! Welcome! Alright, so... pretty good. I think the lesson here is clear. Don't get too cocky with your alteration magic, I believe is the tale to be told here. Let's go into... Thank you. Let's go into something a little more lighthearted. Another one of my favorites that I really, really enjoy. You'll have to pay close attention to catch the trick here in this one. But this is Withershins by Vakut Tawashi. And again, I'm probably butchering these names, but whatever. On we go. All right, said there. All right, said Kazaga. Why don't you want to talk? Zaki put down his mug of mead and just stared at his wife for a few seconds. Finally, grudgingly, because every time I have a conversation, darling, it flows in alphabetical order. Just like I told you, I think the only way to stop it is not to talk at all. Couldn't you just be imagining this? Said Kazaga patiently. It wouldn't be the first time you had an insane paranoid delusion. Remember when you thought the royal battle mage of Black Marsh was hiding behind every tree with lewd intent? Intent on making you, a middle-aged, fat, balding tailor, into his personal sex slave? You don't need to be ashamed, but it's Sheogoaf's way to make us all a little crazy sometimes. If you go to the healer— Damn it, Kazaga! Snarled Zaki, and stomped out, slamming the door behind him. He nearly collided with Siasat, his neighbor. Excuse me, she said to Zaki's back. He clamped his hand over his ears as he stormed down the street, turning the corner to his tailor shop. His first customer was waiting out front, smiling widely. Zaki tried to keep his temper under control and took out his keys, returning the customer's smile. Fine day, said the young man. Gods! Hollered Zaki, sending the young man flying with a well-placed punch and dashing away. As much as he hated to admit that Kazaga was right, it was evidently time, once again, for one of the healer's herbal cocktails. Tarsu's temple to health, mental, and physical was several streets north, an impressive obelisk. Kalka, the chief herbalist, met him before he came in the hall. How are you today, Sazaki-Saf? I need to make an appointment with Tarsu, said Zaki, in his calmest voice. Just one moment, let me see how his schedule looks, Kalka said, looking over a scroll. Is this an emergency? Kind of, said Zaki, and slapped his head. Why couldn't he say yes, or absolutely, or sure? Let's see, said Kalka, frowning. The best I can do is next Midas. Would that work for you? Midas? Cried Zaki. I'll be a complete psychotic by Midas. Isn't there anything earlier? He knew what the answer would be before she said it. There was no alternative. In a way, he had forced the response. If only he had kept the conversation going until why. No, said Kalka. I'm sorry. Do you want me to make the appointment? Zaki walked away, gritting his teeth. He wandered the street, his head down to avoid all conversation, until he looked up and discovered that he had walked all the way to the wharf. A sweet breeze was blowing along the water, and he took several deep breaths until he felt almost normal. When his temper cooled, he could think again. What if this alphabetic conversation wasn't a delusion at all? What if what he felt wasn't paranoia, but acute awareness? He knew it was the classic dilemma. Am I crazy? Or is there really something weird going on? Across the road was a shop called Paradox, featuring a display of herbs, crystals, and vapors trapped in orbs. The sign in the window read, Mystical Consultation, sunrise to noon. It was worth a shot, though Zaki was dubious. The only people who generally came down the wharf for healing were stupid adventurers who didn't know any better. Incense burned in copious billows of pink and gold, obscuring and then revealing the clutter within. Sissic death masks glowed down from the walls. Smoking censers hung by chains from the ceiling, and the floor was a maze of bookshelves. At a well-worn table in the back, a small man wearing a headdress was tabulating a young lady's purchases. Okay, said the man. Your total comes to 57 gold pieces. I threw in the restorative stale conditioner for free. And just remember, the candle should be lit only after you invoke Gorflox the Unholy, and Mandrake Root does best in partial shade. The customer gave a quick, shy smile to Zaki and left the store. Please help me, said Zaki. Every conversation I hear or get involved in seems to be arranged alphabetically. I don't know if I'm going insane or if there are some kind of bizarre forces at work. To be honest with you, I'm normally a skeptic when it comes to your type of business, but I'm at the end of my rope. Can you do anything to make this madness end? Quite a common problem, actually, said the man, patting Zaki on the arm. When you get to the end of the alphabet, do conversations then go to reverse alphabetical order, or start at the beginning of the alphabet? Reverse alphabetical order, said Zaki, and then corrected himself. Damn it! I mean, it starts from the beginning all over again. I'm in agony. Can you call on the spirits and tell me? Am I insane? Sauriki, said the man with a reassuring smile. I don't have to. You're quite sane. Thank you, said Zaki, frowning. By the way, my name's Zaki, not Sauriki. Oh, unusually close, eh? Said the man, patting Zaki on the back. My name's Octoplasm. Follow me, please. I think I have just what you need. Octoplasm led Zaki down the narrow corridor behind the desk. The two men pushed past dusty cabinets filled with strange creatures and liquids, past heaps of Neolithic stones, past stack after stack of moldering leather-bound books, into the dank heart of the store. There, he picked up a small, squat, cylindrical drum and a book, and handed them to Zaki. Vampirism, Daedric Possession, and Withershin Therapy, said Zaki, squinting his eyes to read the book in the gloom. What in oblivion does this have to do with me? I'm not a vampire, look at this tan. And what's Withershin Therapy? And how much will it cost me? Withershin, from the old Cyrillic wither sins, which means backwards, said Octoplasm in a serious tone. It's the art of reversing the direction of things in order to gain access to the spirit world, and break curses, cure vampirism, and trigger all manners of apotropaic healing. You know the story about the guy who was told that slaughterfish live in hot water? So he said, well, let's boil them in cold water. Xenophus, said Zaki instinctively, his brother having taken a rather esoteric upper-level course in Cyrillic philosophy as an elective in at the Imperial College 31 years before, and immediately wishing he hadn't. And what do you do with the cylindrical thingy? Octoplasm lit a candle and held the object over so Zaki could see it more clearly. All along the cylinder were narrow slits, and when Zaki peered within them, he saw a succession of old black and white drawings of a naked man leaping over boxes, one frame after the next. You spin it like so, said Octoplasm, slowly whirring the device clockwise so the man within leapt over the boxes over and over again. It's called a zoetrope. Pretty neat, eh? Now, you take it and start spinning it counterclockwise, and while you're doing it, read the incantation I've marked in the book. Zaki took the zoetrope and began spinning it counterclockwise over the candle, so the little naked man within seemed to bound backwards over the boxes. It took a little concentration and coordination to keep whirring at a steady pace, but gradually the man's awkward and jerky back jumps became more and more fluid, until Zaki could no longer see the individual frames flipping. It looked just like a little humanoid hamster on an endless reverse treadmill. While he continued to spin the zoetrope in one hand, Zaki took the book in the other and read the underlined passage. Zoetrope, counterspin, counterspin, counterspin. Pull my life from the rut that it's in. I invoke the goddess Boethia, Kinnereth, and Drysis to invert my potentially metaphysical crisis. My old life may have been rather pointless and plain, but I dislike the prospect of going insane. Make the pattern reverse by this Withershin. Zoetrope, counterspin, counterspin, counterspin. As he chanted the spell, Zaki noticed that the little naked man in the zoetrope began to look more like himself. The mustache vanished, and the hairline receded. The man's waistline expanded, and the buttocks sagged to the shape and texture of half-inflated balloons. Scales approximating his own Argonian pattern appeared. The man began to trip as he bounded backward over the boxes, taking bigger breaths and sweating. By the time Zaki reached the end of the incantation, his twin was clutching his chest and tumbling end over the boxes in a freefall. Octoplasm took the zoetrope and the book from Zaki's hands. Nothing seems to have changed. No thunder had rumbled, no winged serpents had spun out of Zaki's head, no fiery explosions. But Zaki felt that something was different. Good different. Normal. At the counter, when Zaki pulled out his satchel of gold pieces, Octoplasm merely shook his head. Our treatment radicals such of effects term long, the what sure be can't between naturally. Charge no! Feeling the first real relief he had felt in days, Zaki walked backwards out of the shop and down the road to his shop. So, did you guys catch the trick in that one? They spelled it out a few times, but every piece of conversation started with a different letter of the alphabet. I love stuff like that. So that one got a good chuckle out of me. Also, these books are really difficult to find. Like, I thought that I would just be able to buy them from, like, Court Wizards or whatnot, but a lot of these I had to go out hunting for in caves and such. Caves and tombs and all that. Got a few good level ups out of it, but sheesh. Hey Genomes! Welcome to the chat! I do see the Japanese, dude. That's really awesome. Konnichiwa, kun. Oyasumi to. Nice. Ah, nice to know that my Japanese is not as rusty as I thought. All right. Let's move on to another one. Let's see. Oh, I know. Stumpy. The mirror is one that you requested, I believe. Is that correct? It was either you who recommended this, or someone else. But let's check out the mirror. A little tale from the fields of battle. The Mirror, by Birdier Winds. One of your favorites? Well, I hope I do it justice then. The wind blew over the open plain, jostling the few trees within to move back and forth with the irritation of it. A young man in a bright green turban approached the army and gave his chieftain's terms for peace to the commander. He was refused. It was to be battle, the Battle of Ein Kalor. So the chief Iambez had decreed his open defiance, and his horsemen were at war once again. Many times the tribe had moved into territory that was not theirs to occupy, and many times the diplomatic approach had failed. It had come to this, at long last. It was just as well with Mindothrax. His allies may win or lose, but he would always survive. Though he had occasionally been on the losing side of a war, never once in all his 34 years had he lost in hand-to-hand combat. The two armies poured like dual frothing streams through the dust, and when they met, a clamor rang out, echoing into the hills. Blood, the first liquor the clay had tasted in many a month, danced like powder. The high and low battle cries of the rival tribes met in harmony as the armies dug into one another's flesh. Mindothrax was in the element he loved. After 10 hours of fighting with no ground given, both commanders called a mutual and honorable withdrawal from the field. The camp was positioned in a high-walled garden of an old burial ground, adorned by springtide blossoms. As Mindothrax toured the grounds, he was reminded of his childhood home. It was a happy and a sad recollection, the purity of childhood ambition, all of his schooling in the way of battle, but tinged with memories of his poor mother. a beautiful woman, looking down at her son with both pride and unspoken sorrow. She never talked about what troubled her, but it came as no surprise to any when she took the walk across the moors and was found days later, her throat slit open by her own hand. The army itself was like a colony of ants, newly shaken. Within a half-hour's time after the end of the battle, they had reorganized as if by instinct. As the medics looked to the wounded, someone remarked, with a measure of admiration and astonishment, "Look at Mindathrax. His hair isn't even out of place." "He is a mighty swordsman," said the attending physician. "The sword is a greatly overvalued article," said Mindathrax, nevertheless pleased with the attention. "Warriors pay too much attention to striking, and not enough in defending strikes. The proper way to go into battle is to defend yourself, and to hit your opponent only when the ideal moment arises." "I prefer a more straightforward approach," said one of the wounded. "It is the way of the horsemen." "If it is the way of the Bajulse tribe to fail, then I renounce my heritage," said Mindathrax, making a quick sign to the spirits that he was being expressive, not blasphemous. "Remember what the great blade master Gaiden Shinji said. The best techniques are passed on by the survivors. I have been in 36 battles, and haven't a scar to show for them. That is because I rely on my shield, and then my blade. In that order." "What is your secret?" "Think of melee as a mirror. I look to my opponent's left arm when I am striking with my right. If he is prepared to block my blow, I blow not. Why exert undue force?" Mindathrax cocked an eyebrow, but when I see his right arm tense, my left arm goes to my shield. You see, it takes twice as much power to send force than it does to deflect it. When your eye can recognize whether your opponent is striking from above, or at angle, or in an uppercut from below, you learn to pivot and place your shield just so, to protect yourself. I could block for hours if need be, but it only takes a few minutes, or even seconds, for your opponent, used to battering, to leave a space open for your own strike." "What was the longest you've ever had to defend yourself?" asked the wounded man. "I fought a man once for an hour's time," said Mindathrax. "He was tireless with his bludgeoning, never giving me a moment to do aught but block his strikes. But finally, he took a moment too long in raising his cudgel, and I found my mark in his chest. He struck my shield 1,000 times, and I struck his heart once. But that was enough." "So, he was your greatest opponent?" asked the medico. "Oh, indeed not," said Mindathrax, turning his great shield so the silvery metal reflected his own face. "There is he." The next day, the battle recommenced. Chief Viembes had brought in reinforcements to the islands from the south. To the horror and disgrace of the tribe, mercenaries, renegade horsemen, and even some Reachman witches were included in the war. As Mindathrax stared across the field at the armies assembling, putting on his helmet and readying his shield and blade, he thought again of his poor mother. What had tortured her so? Why had she never been able to look at her son without grief? Between sunrise and sundown, the battle raged. A bright blue sky overhead burned down on the combatants as they rushed against one another over and over again. In every melee, Mindathrax prevailed. A foe with an axe rained a series of strokes against his shield, but every one was deflected until at last Mindathrax could best the warrior. A spear maiden nearly pierced his shield with her first strike, But Mindathrax knew how to give with the blow, throwing her off balance and leaving her open for his counterstrike. Finally, he met a mercenary on the field, armed with shield and sword and a helm of golden bronze. For an hour and a half, they battled. Mindathrax tried every trick he knew. When the mercenary tensed his left arm, he held back his strike. When his opponent rose his sword, his shield rose too, and expertly blocked. For the first time in his life, he was battling another defensive fighter. Stationary, reflective, with energy to battle for days if need be. Occasionally, another warrior would enter into the fray, sometimes from Mindathrax's army, sometimes from his opponent's. These distractions were swiftly dispatched, and the champions returned to their fight. As they fought, circling one another, matching block for blow and blow for block, it dawned on Mindathrax that here, at last, he was fighting his perfect mirror. It became more a game, almost a dance, than a battle of blood. It was not until Mindathrax missed his own step, striking too soon, throwing himself off balance, that the promenade was ended. He saw, rather than felt, the mercenary's blade rip across him from throat to chest. A good strike, the sort he himself might have delivered. Mindathrax fell to the ground, feeling his life passing. The mercenary stood over him, prepared to give his worthy adversary the killing blow. It was a strange, honorable deed for an outsider to do, and Mindathrax was greatly moved. Across the battlefield, he heard someone call a name, similar to his own. Jurifax! The mercenary removed his helmet to answer the call. As he did so, Mindathrax saw through the slits of his helmet his own reflection in the man. It was his own close-set eyes, red and brown hair, thin and wide mouth, and blunt chin. For a moment, he marveled at the mirror, before the stranger turned back to him and delivered the death blow. Jurifax returned to his commander and was paid for his part in the day's victory. They retired for a hot meal under the stars in a garden by an old cairn that had previously been occupied by their foes. The mercenary was strangely quiet as he observed the land. "Have you been here before, Jurifax?" asked one of the tribesmen who had hired him. "I was born a horseman, just like you. My mother sold me when I was just a babe. I've always wondered how my life might have been different had I not been bartered away. I might never have been a mercenary." "There are many things that decide our fate," said the witch. "It is madness to try and see how you might have taken this turn or that in the world. There are none exactly like yourself, so it is foolish to compare." "But there is one," said Jurifax, looking to the stars. "My master, before he set me free, said that my mother had twin sons when I was born. She could only afford to raise but one child, but somewhere out there is a man just like me, my brother. I hope to meet him." The witch saw the spirits before her and knew the truth, that the twins had met already. She remained silent and stared into the fire, banishing the thoughts from her head, too wise to tell all. Excellent pick, Stumpy Knight. That was a good one. Yeah, oof is right. Let me get some more water real quick. Okay, I'm back. Oh, chills, huh? Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Do you have a game at dinner? I do, as a matter of fact. I've got it right here. And in fact, we'll go ahead and do that one next. Since you requested. Here we go. A game at dinner by an anonymous spy. A foreword from the publisher. The history behind this letter is almost as interesting and dark as the story it tells. The original letter to the mysterious Doanaine was copied and began circling around the ashlands of Vardenfell a few months ago. In time, a print found its way to the mainland, and Prince Clalu Kelif's palace outside Alamexia. While the reader may conclude after reading this letter that the prince would be furious about such a work, impugning His Highness with great malevolence, quite the reverse was true. The prince and his mother, Queen Berenzia, had it privately printed into bound copies and sent to libraries and booksellers throughout Morrowind. As matter of record, the prince and the queen have not officially stated whether the letter is a work of pure imagination or based on actual occurrences. The House Driss has publicly denounced the work, and indeed, no one named Doanaine, despite the suggestion in the letter, has ever been linked to the house. We leave the reader to interpret the letter as he or she believes. Nariscan, publisher. Dark Liege Doanaine, you ask for a detailed description of my experience last night, and the reasons for my plea to House Drays for another assignment. I hope I have served you well in my capacity as informant in the court of Prince Kelseth, a man who I have stated in many previous reports could teach Molag Bal how to scheme. As you know, I've spent nearly a year now working my way into his inner circle of advisors. He was in need of friendship when he first arrived in Morrowind, and eagerly took me and a few others. Still, he was disinclined to trust any of us, which is perhaps not surprising, given his tenuous position in Morrowind society. For your holiness's recollection, the prince is the eldest son of Berenzia, who was once the queen of Morrowind, and once the queen of the High Rock Kingdom of Wayrest. At the death of her husband, Prince Kelseth's stepfather, King Eadweir, there was a power struggle between the prince and Eadweir's daughter, the Princess Elisana. Though details of what transpired are imperfect, it is clear that Elisana won the battle and became queen, banishing Kelseth and Berenzia. Berenzia's only other child, Morgaya, had already left court to marry and become queen of the Somerset Islands, kingdom of the First Hold. Berenzia and Kelseth crossed the continent to return to Morrowind only last year. They were well received by Berenzia's uncle, our current king, Clalu Aethian Lethian, who had taken the throne after Berenzia's abdication more than 40 years ago. Berenzia made it clear she had no designs on reclaiming the throne, but merely to retire to her family's estates. Kelseth, as you know, has lingered in the royal court, and many have whispered that while he lost the throne of Wayrest, he does not intend to lose the throne of Morrowind at Lethan's death. I've kept your unholiness informed of the prince's movements, meetings, and plots, as well as the names and characters of his other advisors. As you may recall, I've often thought that I was not the only spy in Kelseth's court. I told you before that a particular Dunmer counselor of Kelseth looked like a fellow I had seen in the company of Tholer Sarioni, the archcanon of the Tribunal Temple. Another, a young Nord woman, has been verified to visit the Imperial Fortress in Balmora. Of course, in their cases, they might as well have been on Kelsif's own business, but I couldn't be certain. I had begun to think myself paranoid as the prince himself, when I found myself doubting the sincere loyalty of the prince's chamberlain, Burgess, a Breton who had been in his employ since his days in the court of Wayrest. That is the background on that night. Last night. Yesterday morning, I received a curt invitation to dine with the prince. Based only on my own paranoia, I dispatched one of my servants, who was a good and loyal servant of the House Dreys, to watch the palace and report back anything unusual. Just before dinner, he returned and told me what he had witnessed. A man cloaked in rags had been given entrance into the palace and had stayed there for some time. When he left, my servant saw his face beneath the cloak. An alchemist of infamous repute, said to be a leading supplier of exotic poisons. A fine observer, my servant also noticed that the alchemist entered the palace smelling of wickweed, bitter green, and something alien and sweet. When he left, he was odorless. He had come to the same conclusion as I did. The prince had procured ingredients to prepare a poison. Bitter green alone is deadly when eaten raw, but the other ingredients suggested something far deeper. As your unholiness can doubtlessly imagine, I went to dinner that night, prepared for any eventuality. All of Prince Kelsif's other counselors were in attendance, and I noticed that all were slightly apprehensive. Of course, I imagined that I was in a nest of spies, and all knew of the prince's mysterious meeting. It is just as likely that some knew of the alchemist's visit, while others were simply concerned by the nature of the prince's invitation. And still others merely unconsciously adopted the tense disposition of the fellow, better informed counselors. The prince, however, was in fine mettle, and soon everyone relaxed and at ease. At 9, we were ushered into his dining hall, where the feast had been laid out. And what a feast! Honeyed gore apples, fragrant stews, roasts in various blood sauces, and every variety of fish and fowl expertly and ostentatiously prepared. Crystal and gold flagons of wine, flin, sheen, and mats were at our seats to be savored as appropriate with each course. As tantalizing as the aromas were, it occurred to me that in such a maze of spices and flavors, a discreet poison would be undetectable. Throughout the meal, I maintained the illusion of eating the food and drinking the liquor, but I was surreptitious and swallowed nothing. Finally, the plates and food were cleared from the table, and a tureen of spicy broth was placed in the center of the banquet. The servant who brought it then retired, closing the banquet hall door behind him. "It smells divine, my prince," said the Marchioness Colgar, the Nord woman, "but I cannot eat another thing." "Your Highness," I added, feigning a tone of friendliness and slight intoxication, "you know that everyone at this table would gladly die to put you on the throne of Morrowind, but is it really necessary that we gorge ourselves to death?" The others at the table agreed with appreciative groans. Prince Kelsif smiled. "I swear by Vernima the Gifter, my dark liege, even you have never seen a smile such as this one." Ironic words. You see, an alchemist visited me today, as some of you already doubtlessly know. He showed me how to make a marvelous poison, and its antidote. A most potent potion, excellent for my purposes. No restoration spell will aid you once you've ingested it. Only the antidote in the tureen will save you from certain death. And what a death, from what I'm heard. I'm eager to see if the effects are all that the alchemist promised. It should be horribly painful for the afflicted, but quite entertaining. No one said a word. I could feel my heart beating hard in my chest. "Your Highness," said Alarat, the Dunmer I suspected of alliance with the temple. "Have you poisoned someone at this table?" "You're very astute, Alarat," said Prince Kelsef, looking around the table, eyeing each of his advisors carefully. "Little wonder I value your counsel, as indeed I value all in this room. It would be easier, perhaps, for me to say who I haven't poisoned. I haven't poisoned any who serve but one master, any whose loyalty to me is sincere. I haven't poisoned any person who wants to see King Kelsef on the throne of Morrowind. I haven't poisoned anyone who isn't a spy for the Empire, the Temple, the House of Tavani, the House of Ridderun, the House of Indoril, the House of Dress." "Your Unholiness," he looked directly at me at his last words. I know that in certainty. My face is practiced at keeping my thoughts from showing. But I immediately thought of every secret meeting I'd had, every coded message I'd sent to you in the house, my dark liege. What could he know? What could he, even without knowing, suspect? I felt my heart beating even faster. Was it fear or poison? I couldn't speak, certain as I was that my voice would betray my calm facade. "Those loyal to me who wish harm on my enemies may be wondering how can I be certain that the poison has been ingested. Is it possible that the guilty party, or dare I say, parties, were suspicious and merely pretended to eat and drink tonight? But even the craftiest of pretenders would have to raise a glass to his or her lips and put empty forks or spoons in their mouths to play the charade. The food, you see, was not poisoned. The cups and cutlery were. If you did not partake out of fear, you were poisoned just the same, and sadly, missed an excellent roast." Sweat beaded on my face, and I turned from the prince so he would not see. My fellow advisors, all of them, were frozen in their seats. From the Marchioness Colgar, white with fear, to Kema Inebe, visibly shaking from the furrowed, angry brow of Alarat, to the statue-like stare of Burgess. I couldn't help thinking then, could the prince's entire counselorship be comprised of nothing but spies? Was there anyone at the table was there any person at the table loyal? And then I thought, what if I were not a spy myself? Would I trust Kelsef to know that? No one knows better than his advisors both the depth of the prince's paranoia and the utter implacability of his ambition. If I were not a spy for the House Dress, even then would I be safe? Could a loyalist be poisoned because of a not-so-innocent misjudgment? The others must have been thinking the same, loyalists and spies alike. While my mind whirled, I could hear the prince's voice, addressing all assembled. "The poison acts quickly. If the antidote is not taken within 1 minute from now, here will be death at the table." I couldn't decide whether I'd been poisoned or not. My stomach ached, but I reminded myself it might be the result of sitting at a sumptuous banquet and not partaking. My heart shook in my chest, and a bitter taste, like trauma root, stung my lips. Again, was it fear or poison? "These are the last words you will hear if you are disloyal to me," said Prince Kelsef, still smiling that damned smile as he watched his advisors squirming in their seats. "Take the antidote and live." Could I believe him? I thought of what I knew of the prince on his character. Would he kill a self-confessed spy at his court? Or would he rather send the vanquished back to his masters? The prince was ruthless, but either possibility was within his manner. Surely the theatricality of this whole dinner was meant to be a presentation to instill fear. What would my ancestors say if I joined them after sitting at a table, eventually dying of poison? What would they say if I took the antidote, confessing my allegiance to you and to House Dress, and was summarily executed. And, I confess, I thought of what you might do to me, even after I was dead. I had grown so lightheaded and filled with my own thoughts that I didn't see Burgess jump from his seat. I was only suddenly aware that he had the tureen in his hand, and was gulping down the liquid within. There were guards all around, though I never noticed them entering. Burgess, said Prince Kelseth, still smiling. You have spent some time at Ghostgate. House Redoran?
She didn't know. Burgess laughed sourly. No, House. I report to your sister, the Queen of Wayrest. I've always been in her employ. By Akatosh, you poisoned me because you thought I was working for some damnable dark elves?
You're half right, said the prince. I didn't guess who you were working for, or even that you were a spy. But you're also wrong about me poisoning you. You poisoned yourself when you drank from the tureen. Your Unholiness, you don't need to hear how Burgess died. I know that you have seen much over the many, many years of your existence, but you truly don't want to know. I wish I could erase the memory of his agonies from my own mind. The council was dismissed shortly thereafter. I do not know if Prince Kelseth knows or suspects that I too am a spy. I do not know how many others last night, were as close as I was from drinking from the tureen before Burgess did. I only know that if the prince does not suspect me now, he will. I cannot win at the games he mastered long ago at the court of Wayrest. And I beg your Unholiness, my dark liege Daunain, to use your influence in the House Dress and dismiss your loyal servant from this charge. Publisher's note. Of course, the anonymous writer's signature has not been on any reprints of the letter since the original. Whew! Well then. That was quite the murder mystery, wasn't it? Though I don't know if you can call that a murder mystery, because we knew from the start that somebody was poisoned. But that one's really good. That was an excellent pick, Genomes. Well done. I really enjoyed that one a lot. That was a good one. Alright. Let's take another request. Whoops. I don't know if this person is in the chat right now, but somebody requested that I do the rear guard. One second. Alright, moving on. The Rear Guard by Tenants Moral. You don't know any of these, but it's been awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, Zelda. Yeah, Skyrim has some, and Elder Scrolls in general has some absolutely amazing lore. Alright, here we go. The Rear Guard. The castle would hold. No matter the forces, the walls of Cascabel Hall would never fail. But that was small consolation for Menegar. He was hungry. In fact, he had never been so hungry. The well in the atrium of the fortress supplied him with enough water to hold until the Fourth Era. But his stomach reminded Menegar minute to minute that he needed food. The wagon load of supplies mocked him. When his army, the forces of the King of Solitude, had left Cascabel Hall, and he had manned the battlements as the rear guard to protect their retreat, they had left a wagon behind to supply him with enough food for months. It was not until the night after they left that he inspected the larder, and found that nothing edible was in the wagon. Trunk after trunk was filled with Netch armor from the army's incursion into Morrowind. Apparently, his Nord confederates had assumed that the lightly opaque material was hardtack in aspect. If the Dunmer whose caravan had been raided knew about this, they would never be able to stop laughing. Miniger thought that his fellow mercenary and kinswoman, Erin, would have found this amusing as well. She had spoken with great authority about necked leather, being an expert of sorts on light armor. But she had made a point to mention that it could not be eaten like other leather in occasions of hardship. It was a pity she couldn't be there to enjoy the irony, Menninger thought savagely. She had returned to Morrowind even before the king's army had left, preferring a life as a wanted fugitive to a free existence in the cold of Skyrim. All the weeds in the courtyard had been devoured by the rear guard's 16th Bay manning Cassabell Hall. The entire castle had been scoured, rotten tubers in the mold pile found and consumed, a dusty bouquet in the countless bedchamber eaten, almost every rat and insect but the most cunning infesting the castle walls had been tracked down and gobbled up. The castellan's chambers, filled with acrid, inedible law books, had yielded up a couple crumbs of bread. Menninger had even scraped moss from the stones. There was no denying it. He would be dead from starvation before his army returned to break the ranks of the enemies who surrounded the fortress.
The worst part,
said Menninger, who had taken to talking to himself on only the second day alone in the castle,
is how close sustenance is.
A vast arbor of golden apples stretched acre after acre near the castle walls. The sunlight cast a seductive gleam on the fruit, and the cruel wind carried sweet smells into Cascabel to torture him. Like most Bosmer, Menninger was an archer. He was a master of long and medium-distance fighting, but in close quarters, as he would be if he dared to leave the castle and enter the enemy camp in the arbor. He knew he would not last long. At some point, he knew he would have to try. But he had been dreading the day. It was upon him now. Menninger put on the Netch armor for the first time, feeling the powdery, almost velvet texture of the rendered leather against his skin. There was also a barely perceptible throb, which he recognized as the remnant nematosis of the Netch's venomous flesh, still tingling months after its death with domesticated poison. The combination made him feel energized. Erin had described the sensation perfectly, just as she had explained how to defend himself while wearing Netch leather armor. Under cover of night, Menninger crept out of the back gate of the castle, locking it behind him with a rather cumbersome key. He made for the arbor as quietly as he could, but a passing sentry coming behind a tree saw him. Remaining calm, Menninger did as he remembered Erin had instructed, only moving after the attack had been launched. The sentry's blade glided against the armor and knocked to the left, throwing the young man off balance. That was the trick, as he understood it. You had to be prepared to hit, and merely move with the blow, allowing the membranous armor to divert the injury away. Use your enemy's momentum against him, as Erin used to say. There were several more close encounters in the arbor, but each swing of an axe and each thrust of a sword found purchase elsewhere. With handfuls of apples, Menninger ran the gauntlet back to the castle. He locked the gate door behind him and fell into an orgy of eating. For week after week, the Bosmer stole out to gather his food. The guards began anticipating his raids, but he kept his schedules irregular, and always remembered when to attack to wait for the blow, accept it, and then turn. In such a way, he lived and survived his lonely vigil in Cascabel Hall. 4 months later, as he was preparing for another seizure of apples, Menninger heard a loud clamor at the front gate. Surveying the group from a safe distance on the battlements, he saw the shields of the King of Solitude, his ally, the Count of Cascabel, and their enemy, the King of Farn. Evidently, a truce had been called. Menninger opened the gates, and the combined armies flooded the courtyard. Many of the Knights of Farron sought to shake the hand of the man they had named the Shadow of the Arbor, expressing their admiration at his defensive skills, and apologizing good-naturedly for their attempts to slay them. Only doing their job, you know.
Well, it's hardly an apple left on the vines,
said the King of Solitude.
Well, I started on the edges and worked my way in,
explained Menninger.
I brought back extra fruit to tempt the rats out of the walls so I could have a little meat as well. We spent the last several months working out the details of the truce, said the king. Really quite exhausting. At any rate, the Count will be taking possession of his castle now. But there is a small detail we need to work out. You're a mercenary, and as such responsible for your own expenses. If you had been a subject of mine, things might be different. But there are certain old rules of law that must be respected.
Menninger anticipated the strike.
The problem is, the king continued, you've taken a good deal of the Count's crops while here. By any reasonable computation, you've eaten an amount equal to and likely exceeding your mercenary wages. Obviously, I would not want to penalize you for the excellent job you've done in defending the castle in uncomfortable circumstances. But you agree that it's important that we observe the old rules of law, don't you?
Of course, replied Menninger, accepting the blow.
I'm delighted to hear that, said the king. Our estimation is that you owe the Count of Cascabel 37 imperial gold.
Which I will gladly pay to myself, with interest, after the autumntide harvest, said Menninger. There is more left on the vine than you suggest. The Kings of Solitude and Farron and the Count of Cascabel stared at the Bosmer. We agreed to abide to the strictest old rules of law, and I've had to read a great many books over the time you were making your truce. In 3E246, during the reign of Uriel IV, the Imperial Council, in an attempt to clear up some question of property rights in Skyrim during those chaotic days, decreed that any man without a liege who occupied a castle for more than 3 months would be granted the rights and titles of that estate. It's a good law, of course, meant to discourage absent and foreign landlords. Menninger smiled, feeling the now familiar sensation of a glancing strike diverting. By the rule of law, I am the Count of Cascabel. The rear-guard son still holds the title of Count of Cascabel, and he grows the finest, most delectable apples in the Empire. Ah, yes, he was technically correct. The best kind of correct. Ah, man, that's a good one. I enjoy that one. I believe that was a friend from a Discord server who suggested that one, Karumi. Karumi, I don't know if you're watching this, but thanks for the suggestion. Oh, you gotta go? All right, thanks for tuning in, Genomes. It was hope you had fun, man. All right. Let us move on to another story. Let's see. Here's a good one. The Locked Room. Wait, how did I get lockpicking? I just picked this. How did I just get lockpicking? I could have sworn I picked up this book. Huh. Neat! Moving on. Yes, I found all of these books completely legitimately. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, The Locked Room by Porbert Letumley. Yana was precisely the kind of student her mentor Arth Kamu despised, the professional amateur. He enjoyed all the criminal types who were his usual pupils at the stronghold, from the common burglar to the more sophisticated blackmailers, children and young people with strong career ambitions, which the art and science of lockpicking could facilitate. They were always interested in simple solutions, the easy way. But people like Yana were always looking for exceptions, possibilities, exotica. For pragmatists like Arthkamu, it was intensely vexing. The Red Guard maiden would spend hours in front of a lock, prodding at it with her wires and picks, flirting with the key pins and driver pins, exploring the hull with a sort of casual fascination that no delinquent possesses. Long after her fellow students had opened their test locks and moved on, Yana was still playing with hers. The fact that she always opened it eventually, no matter how advanced the lock it was, irked Arthkamu even further.
"You are making things much too difficult," he would roar, boxing her ears. "Speed is of the essence, not merely technical know-how. I swear that if I put the key in the lock right in front of you, you'd still never get around to opening it."
Yana would bear Arthkamu's abuse philosophically. She had, after all, paid him in advance. Speed was doubtless an important factor for the picker trying to get somewhere he wasn't supposed to go with the city guard on patrol behind him. But Yana knew it wouldn't apply to her. She merely wanted the knowledge. Arthkamu did everything he could think of to encourage Yana to move faster. She seemed to perversely thrive on his physical and verbal blows, spending more and more time on each lock, learning its idiosyncrasies and personality. Finally, he could bear it no longer. Very late one afternoon, after Yana had dawdled over a perfectly ordinary lock, he grabbed the girl by her ear and dragged her to a room in the stronghold, far from the other students, an area they had always been forbidden to visit. The room was completely barren, except for one large crate in the center. There were no windows, and no other door except for the one leading in. Arthkamu slammed his student against the crate and closed the door behind her. There was a distinct click of the lock.
"This is the test for my advanced students," he laughed behind the door. "See if you can escape."
Yana smiled and began her usual slow process of massaging the lock, gaining information. After a few minutes had gone by, she heard Arthkamu's voice again call out from behind the door.
"Perhaps I should mention that this is a test of speed. You see the crate behind you? It contains a vampire ancient who has been locked in here for many months. It is absolutely ravenous. In a few minutes' time, the sun will have completely set, and if you've not opened that door, you will be nothing but a bloodless husk."
Yana considered only for a moment whether Arthkamu was joking or not. She knew he was an evil, horrible man, but to resort to murder to teach his pupil? The moment she heard a rustling in the crate, any doubts she had were erased. Ignoring all her usual explorations, she jammed her wire into the lock, thrust the pegs against the pressure plate, and shoved open the door. Arthkamu stood in the hallway beyond, laughing cruelly.
"So, now you've learned the value of fast work."
Yana fled from Arthkamu's stronghold, fighting back her tears. He was certain that she would never return to his tutelage, but he considered that he had taught her at last a very valuable lesson. When she did return the next morning, Arthkamu registered no surprise, but inside he was seething. "I'll be leaving shortly," she explained, quietly, "but I believe I've developed a new type of lock, and I'd be grateful if you gave me your opinion of it." Arthkamu shrugged and asked her to present her design. "I was wondering if I might use the vampire room and install the lock. I think it would be better if I demonstrated it." Arthkamu was dubious, but the prospect of the tiresome girl leaving him at last put him in an excellent and even indulgent mood. He agreed to give her access to the room. For all morning and most of the afternoon, she worked near the slumbering vampire, removing the old lock and adding her new prototype. Finally, she asked her old master to take a look. He studied the lock with an expert eye and found little to be impressed with. This is the first and only pick-proof lock, Yana explained. The only way to open it is to have the right key. Arthkamu scoffed and let Yana close the door, shutting him in the room. The door clicked and he began to go to work. To his dismay, the lock was much more difficult than he thought it would be. He tried all his methods to force it, and found that he had to resort to his hated student's method of careful and thorough exploration. "I need to leave now," called Yana from the other side of the door. "I'm going to bring the city guard to the stronghold. I know that it's against the rules, but I really think it's for the welfare of the villagers not to have a hungry vampire on the loose. It's getting dark, and even though you aren't able to unlock the door, the vampire might be less proud about using the key to escape. Remember when you said if I put the key to the lock right in front of you, you'd still never get around to opening it?" "Wait!" Arthkamu yelled back. "I'll use the key! Where is it? You forgot to give it to me!" But there was no reply. Only the sound of footfalls disappearing down the corridor beyond the door. Arthkamu began to work harder on the lock, but his hands were shaking with fear. With no windows, it was impossible to tell how late it was getting to be. Were minutes that were flying by, or hours? He only knew that the vampire ancient would know. The tools could not stand very much twisting and tapping from Arthkamu's hysterical hands. The wire snapped in the keyhole, just like a student. Arthkamu screamed and pounded on the door, but he knew that no one could possibly hear him. It was while sucking in his breath to scream again, he heard the distinct creak of the crate opening behind him. The vampire ancient regarded the master locksmith with insane, hungry eyes, and flew at him in a frenzy. Before Arthkamu died, he saw it. On a chain that had been placed around the vampire's neck while it had been sleeping was a key. Ah, revenge. What a lovely thing. All right. My voice is starting to go a little bit, so I think it's time. As you guys requested. There's really only one way to end this thing. By popular request, here is The Lusty Argonian Maid. And yes, I did get both volumes. This is for you guys. Please enjoy. The Lusty Argonian Maid, Volume 1, by Crassius Curio. Oh my god. Alright. Act 4, Scene 3. Continued.
Certainly not, kind sir. I am here but to clean your chambers.
Is that all you have come here for, little one? My chambers?
I have no idea what it is you imply, master. I am but a poor Argonian maid.
So you are, my dumpling, and a good one at that. Such strong legs and shapely tail.
Oh, you embarrass me, sir.
Fear not, you are safe here with me.
I must finish my cleaning, sir. The mistress will have my head if I do not.
Cleaning, eh? I have something for you. Here, polish my spear.
But it is huge. It could take me all night.
Plenty of time, my sweet. Plenty of time.
End Act 4, Scene 3. And Volume 2. Act 7. This is a long-ass play. Act 7, Scene 2, continued.
My goodness, that's quite a loaf. But however shall it fit in my oven?
This loaf isn't ready for baking, my sweet. It has yet to rise.
If only we could hurry that along. How would I accomplish such a task?
Oh, my foolish little Argonian maid. You must use your hands.
You wish me to knead the loaf? Here?
Of course.
But what if the mistress catches me? Your loaf was meant to satisfy her appetite.
Don't fret, my delicate flower. I'll satisfy the mistress's cravings later.
Very well, but I'm afraid my oven isn't hot enough. It could take hours.
Plenty of time, my sweet. Plenty of time.
End of Act 7, Scene 2. Alright, there you go, guys. I read it, and I'm not going to read it again. Too bad, Stumpy, you missed out. Actually, this is gonna be up for like an entire... This is gonna be up for like an entire week on Twitch, so... Are there other ones? I can only find the first 2 volumes of the Maid. I know that there is the Sultry Argonian Bard, which I was not able to locate, unfortunately. I think that's in the Dawn, the Dragonborn one. Oh, there's more of these in Oblivion? Oh god. Well, when I finally play Oblivion, we're gonna probably do another reading session there as well. But there you go, guys. There's some stories from Skyrim. And, like I said at the top of the chat, at the top of the stream, this is my holiday gift to you guys. For, hanging out with me, being a part of my journey to being a streamer. It's been a really fun year. I was really nervous to do this whole streaming thing, but you guys have been awesome. You guys have been so supportive. I really, really appreciate it. And here's hoping that even more fun streams to come in 2023. And even bigger and better things for Super Geek Girl in the months and years to come. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys had fun. I know I did. And until next time, stay super, everybody, and have a very, very happy holiday.